In late July 1831, just a month after Cyrus had received the patent for his plow, a few people assembled at a neighboring farm to witness the first public demonstration of an invention that would bring him world fame. Two of the McCormick's slaves held draft horses to prevent them from running away in a fright as Cyrus drove his reaper through 6 acres of oats on John Steele's farm. Though the machine's performance was far from perfect, it couldn't detract from the occasion's significance. Unlike inventors who preceded him, Cyrus McCormick, at age of 22, had managed to incorporate 7 key elements that would predominate in reaper design for years to come. They included a side draft, which allowed the grain to be cut beside the horses so that they trampled the cut stubble rather than uncut grain, a horizontal cutting knife, which vibrated close to the ground, a vertical triangular divider, which helped separate the swath from the standing crop, a row of projecting fingers which moved through the grain to position it vertically for severing, a suspended reel made of thin slats which bent the grain heads toward the knife and pushed the cut stalks onto the platform behind the knife, the platform itself off which the grain was raked from behind, and the main wheel, which rolled along the ground and provided power for the turning reel and the vibrating cutter. McCormick's horse-drawn contraption enabled the farmer to harvest 10 acres of grain a day with the aid of 2 horses and 8 men, thereby reducing his manual labor costs by nearly one half. In contrast, 10 acres of grain would have required 5 scythemen and 10 helpers harvesting manually. If well cared for, a McCormick reaper, priced at $100, could harvest 100 acres a year for 10 years. The page I just read for you is out of a book called The Corporate Tragedy. This book kind of covers the history of International Harvester from the time that Cyrus McCormick invented his reaper to the time when International Harvester eventually sold off its tractor and harvesting division to, at that point, I can't remember the name, I believe it was Tenneco, and eventually became what we now know as Case IH. It is a fascinating story. There's so many parallels to things that are happening in the modern day that it's just interesting to read once again history and understand that, hey, our industry has been around for thousands upon thousands of years, and what's happening today is not a new thing. The years we are living in are not unprecedented. There are things that have been happening for a long time that we learn from reading history books. So this is probably going to be a 2-part episode. There is a lot to cover in terms of the history of what happened with International Harvester. It's a fascinating history. Most of my source is this book, A Corporate Tragedy. I will link that in the description. But on top of that, I have done research on Wikipedia as always. I've watched YouTube videos about that. So any sources that I use for this, I will put in the description of this. But overall, we're going to focus on mostly the not first half. We're going to get to the point where International Harvester kind of starts to fall apart today. There's just too much to cover in one episode. Maybe at some point we'll go to longer episodes instead of multiple shorter episodes. But yeah, so let's settle in. There's a lot to cover here. So as I read for you right there, Cyrus McCormick invented his first reaper in 1831. Okay, so that is nearly 200 years ago now. In 2025, that puts us at 190 something years since that's happened. Before this, you had to harvest grain with either a scythe or a sickle and bunch them all by hand, and it was incredibly tedious, laborious task. And as many people know, even now, harvest windows are short. And so really your ability to profit as a farmer or even just survive back then when you were farming your own food really came down to how much grain can you harvest. It's not how much can you plant and how much can you care for throughout the season. How many acres can you harvest in that narrow window? Because that will define what you can actually, have in the bank, have in stores, use for food, sell, whatever it may be. So when McCormick first invents his reaper and brings it to the market, it is a revolutionary thing. This fundamentally changes our industry right then. It takes a few years for it to catch on, but the invention of the reaper, which is the predecessor to the combine, drastically changes it. It says it nearly doubles the amount of grain someone can harvest in a day. I mean, that's crazy. More than double. You were lucky to be able to cut an acre a day sometimes, depending on how many people you had helping you at the time. So when you can move to harvesting 10 acres a day instead of 1, that is a crazy number. So Cyrus McCormick invents his Reaper in 1831. Um, Believe it or not, it does not catch on right away. Our industry is incredibly slow to adopt sometimes, and many people thought it was a fad. Is one of those things that it would pay for itself, but a lot of people were kind of on the fence. So Cyrus McCormick, he ends up going into the furnace business, um, making furnaces basically an iron worker, um, probably doing a lot of forging stuff by hand, but making furnaces for houses. It was not a great business. He lost a bunch of money. Him and his father went together on it. They basically had to bet the farm, um, and basically lease the farm out to some family members to help pay for the debts. Eventually, they were able to get the farm back, but more or less goes into a quite unprofitable venture um, at that time, while at the same time, Trill still trying to sell these reapers that he had built. So he's working in his iron business, but he's still working on the Reaper, which is good because even if he's not doing great in the furnace business, he's still learning a lot of skills, which will eventually come in handy later. So I'm gonna read this passage for you. In the meantime, he remained preoccupied with a venture into the iron furnace business, a financial disaster that would hone his entrepreneurial skills. The example of successful ironmasters who'd grown wealthy and achieved high position in the Valley of Virginia originally attracted Cyrus to the business, and in 1836 he convinced his father to invest with him in iron ore and timber tracts and a furnace site. After construction on the furnace commenced, however, the ironworks manager proved incompetent, and Cyrus stepped in to replace him. When the price of iron collapsed shortly after that, and a financial panic made capital scarce, the inexperienced McCormicks were overwhelmed with debts, angry creditors, and legal hassles. In desperation, they sold the furnace in 1841, but the worst came the following year. They were forced to transfer the family farm to a relative in exchange for endorsements on $2,000 worth of drafts and notes. Eventually, the money from the sale of the iron and the reapers enabled Cyrus and Robert to repay their debts, and Robert regained the title to the farm. More important, Cyrus learned from his mistakes in the iron furnace fiasco. It taught him the fundamentals of marketing, management, business ethics, and legal procedure, all knowledge that would prove crucial to his pursuits in the reaper business. Years later, he wrote, "All this, my experience in the furnace business, I have ever felt since one of the best lessons of my business experiences. If I had succeeded in the iron enterprise, I would perhaps never have had a sufficient determination and perseverance in the pursuit of my Reaper enterprise to have brought it to the present state of its success." So, all this time working through the iron business, working through also building Reapers, he knew that the Reapers, there was still something there. And this is kind of where he starts to learn a lot about marketing. Marketing in the sense back then was much different than it is today. You know, you're not paying for ads on social media. Back then, your main form of marketing was probably in-field demos or putting something in a paper or sending out letters to people. So Cyrus was very much an innovator in things that we take for granted today. McCormick does get good at marketing, but at the same time, he's also competing against a man named Hussey. He is also producing Reapers, and they are kind of arguing about a patent dispute. It kind of gets thrown out because Hussey technically had not started selling his Reapers in the home state. Eventually, they become pretty big rivals when it comes to the Reaper Wars, which we'll get into in a second. But I'll read this for you. Hussey got a marketing jump on McCormick while the Virginian was preoccupied with the iron business. Hussey exhibited this machine in New York, Illinois, Maryland, Delaware, and Virginia. In 1840, however, Hussey ran into trouble. An unintended improvement on his machine apparently failed to perform as hoped right at the time when hard times were forcing American farmers to postpone equipment purchases. After Hussey's sales peaked at the 36 machines in the 1840s, sales flipped to 22 in 1841 and 10 in 1842. For McCormick, opportunities in the Reaper business offered the chance to pay off his iron debts. He sold 2 improved machines in 1840 and 6 more 2 years later. By early 1843, Hussey, taking notice, wrote to the editor of the Southern Planter of the Richmond, Virginia, challenging McCormick to a machine contest. During that summer's harvest, until that time, McCormick and Hussey had promoted sales through individual field trials, farmer testimonials, and wordy advertisements. When McCormick took up Hussey's challenge, field contests between competing machines became the major battleground for the Reaper Wars. The competition, set for June 30th that year in 25 acres of light wheat on a farm near Richmond, attracted upwards of 40 spectators, the roster of judges signifying the event's importance. included W.H. Rowan, a former U.S. Senator, and C.W. Gooch, a wealthy friend from the Martin Van Buren. As in most field contests of its kind, the judging the winner was no easy task. McCormick, starting at sunup, harvested 17 acres with his reaper. Hussey, who did not arrive until noon, cut only 2 acres, and his machine performed poorly and tangled grain. But because of a mishap with the larger of his 2 machines, Hussey was forced to compete at a distinct disadvantage with the smaller one. The judges, straining to make sense of the unequal contest, found strong points in both machines, but favored McCormick. A retrial the following week was no more conclusive. Yeah, so basically, they have a good old-fashioned field show day where they just bring them out and they compete the machines. These things still happen today. I have seen it happen where we will take all the machines from the big 3 OEMs and we'll put them in a field and we'll show them off who can do what, who can go the fastest, what features can they show off. It's still something that happens today. It was probably much less. There's probably much more high stakes back then for these guys who are selling 6 machines a year than it is now. But this was kind of the start of what we would call field trials and comparing machines and demos and things like that. Like we look back, but this is some of the first machinery on the farm. This was not like, oh, there were tractors left and right. Everyone still had horses back then, and these machines, these reapers, were pulled by horses. So this is some of the first machinery really entering onto the farmstead, and this is the beginning of that. The machinery entering the farm is starting, okay, during this era. So when someone brings a piece of machinery out for a demo or to show off, this is a very new thing, guys. This is not something that has been happening for a while. So, field competition happens. He eventually realizes, oh, there's more opportunity out west. I need to move farther west. And so he ends up moving to Chicago. At the time, Chicago was very much a bustling hub. And he says, I need to be in Chicago. The Midwest, the grain belt is growing. As the Great Plains continue to get settled and more people farming out there, he knew that there was going to be more opportunity. So he was hardly the first of the rising young farm equipment makers to seek greener pastures in the West. However, in 1836, John Deere, a blacksmith from Vermont, had set up shop in Grand Detour, Illinois, about 100 miles west of Chicago. There, Deere learned that the farmers were struggling with cast iron plows for several years. Rich soil of the Midwestern prairie. Several years before, John Lane, another Illinois blacksmith, had addressed the problem by incorporating strips of saw blade steel on a plow, but he neglected to patent his idea. In 1837, Deere started making plows with a steel saw blade share and smooth wrought iron moldboard. Farmers soon praised his self-scouring implement because it cut a clean furrow as soil dropped from the moldboard, and within a decade, Deere and his partner were producing 1,000 a year. In 1848, he sold out and moved 75 miles west of Moline on the Illinois side of the Mississippi River, a location offering waterway transport, water power, and better access to supplies for his expanding business. Like Deere, Cyrus McCormick went westward to Illinois, but he chose the frontier town of Chicago. In the fall of 1847, McCormick and his partner, Chicagoan Charles M. Gray, purchased a factory site along the north side of the Chicago River from William B. Ogden, the town's first mayor. Gray agreed to manage the construction and oversee the reaper making for the next season. At the time, Chicago verged on a rush of prosperity. Though most of its 17,000 residents lived in shacks along its muddy streets, the town was making tycoons of enterprising settlers from the east. The year 1848 brought several key developments. In January, the city was linked to the east by the telegraph, a development that heralded the rise of modern business organizations. That spring, the first ship traveled through the new Michigan and Illinois Canal. The canal, a 12-year project, fulfilled explorer Louis Joliet's vision of a waterway connecting the Mississippi River with the Great Lakes. The following autumn, Mayor Ogden's Galena and Chicago Union Railroad, the town's first railroad, made a 5-mile run west. Ogden, a Yankee making millions on the city's rapidly appreciating real estate, had refused to wait for the eastern rail lines to reach the city. He ordered a locomotive shipped out so he could pursue his plans for a railroad link to the west. Chicago's rapid embrace of the industrial age surely figured in Cyrus McCormick's decision to move there. Its waterways and accessible location were key attributes at a time when he relied heavily on steamboats to ship his machines. The town also offered good Presbyterian preaching, an important personal point for the McCormicks. But he couldn't have foretold the city's serendipitous rise as the railroad's hub and center of the North American grain industry, developments that would escalate his own company's growth. During McCormick's first business season in Chicago, his factory employed 123 workers and sold nearly all the 500 machines it produced. However, McCormick had troubles with his first partner that year and went through several after him. The first falling out was ensued when Gray sold half of his interest to Ogden and William E. Jones in 1848. The next year, the new partnership of McCormick, Ogden & Co., which includes Jones, also dissolved. McCormick formed yet another year-long partnership with Orloff M. Dorman, who ran the company office. But when Dorman wished to extend the arrangement, McCormick refused and pursued the business on his own for nearly a decade. Construction on the new Reaper Works reached completion in 1851, just in time to accommodate a huge surge in the agricultural economy during the first half of the new decade. The brick factory, judged by the admiring press to be the largest of its kind in the world, stood 3 stories high, covered an area of 40 by 190 feet, and featured a 30 horsepower steam engine, an awe-inspiring emblem of the new machine age. The engine powered a planing machine, 2 circular saws, a planing machine, 2 circular saws, a tenant saw, a lathe for turning handles for rakes, pitchforks, etc., mortising machines, and 2 grindstones. According to January 18th, 1849's news stories in the Chicago Weekly Democrat. So, this was a big move. When you move out west to a place like Chicago and you build basically the largest factory of its kind in the world, McCormick means business. So McCormick moves in. The agriculture industry has continued to be mechanized. You kind of heard that jump. Originally he was producing 12 to 20 reapers a year, and now they're producing 500 and employ over 100 people. So that's crazy. He continues to build out this factory. He continues to build out his company, goes through a few partners. All this happens. But the next thing he does, it definitely, once again, kind of foreshadows where we're at today. He starts to build the first sales and dealer network. Okay. So once again, back then you would be selling machines direct, or maybe you'd ship them out to people and they'd sell them and kind of do it on their own. But he says, I want to do this on my own. So he continues to build out this company through his sales and dealer network. So Cyrus McCormick's transfer of his business operation to Chicago coincided with a major shift in his career. Beginning in 1848, when the original patent on his Reaper lapsed, and increasingly throughout his lifetime, his success would depend on his marketing genius, rather than on the royalties for his invention. After a lengthy legal battle, he lost the bid to win a congressional extension of his patent in 1858. By that time, the days when McCormick and Hussey, who had also lost his original patent, controlled a limited market for reapers were long gone. The number of reaper and mowing machine makers, largely using McCormick's original idea, had mushroomed. For the future, McCormick's brilliance as an industrial pioneer would solidify and expand his early leadership. By the mid-1850s, he had already outclassed his competitors by building a highly innovative selling organization. Like other farm implement manufacturers, he commissioned local agents to stock sample machines, take machine orders, repair breakdowns, maintain a supply of spare parts, and instruct customers in the machine operation. Often the agents worked through blacksmiths and general storekeepers who sold directly to farmers. But several years before moving to Chicago, McCormick initiated a practice that distinguished his organization by enabling him to keep tabs on agent activities in the territories. During the harvest, 1845, he employed a handful of agents who were assigned to travel through his sales territories, find prospects, and make sales. By the mid-1850s, when his agency network stretched throughout the United States and Canada, the supervisory traveling agents had evolved into a uniquely effective organization of company salesmen, which included territory agents and Chicago office employees. Chicago would dispatch its best men to the territories during the winter off-season to talk with farmers and agents and make collections and hire and fire territory salesmen. Through the agency system, McCormick offered innovative installment buying terms which accommodated the seasonal swings in the farmer's financial cycle. The farmer made his first payment when purchasing the machine, with the balance and 6% interest due after the harvest. What's more, McCormick was loath to stir up bad feelings against his company in a farming community and rarely sued to collect on a delinquent reaper note. Instead, bad debts multiplied on his books during the severe agricultural depression of the late 1850s. Between 1849 and 1858, unpaid notes mushroomed to nearly 400,000. Only a high profit margin enabled McCormick to stay in business. Through trial and error, McCormick also improvised ways of advertising and promoting his machines. In the early days, he generated publicity for himself by arguing the fine points of his machine in letters to editors of agriculture magazines. He ran lengthy, eye-catching advertisements which featured a drawing of one of his reapers being pulled by 2 horses at an easy trot. Astride, one was a smiling boy wielding a whip. The ads described at length how the reaper worked, how McCormick had labored for years to perfect his machine, and how competing machines had failed. Years later, McCormick, taking a cue from some of the competitors in Ohio, started publishing the Farmer's Advance, a trade magazine dispersed by his agents. The Advance, his chief promotional aid, eventually enjoyed the largest circulation of any paper in rural America. Okay, so he builds out a dealer network. He builds out the first dealer network, the first sales network, and on top of that is leading the way in advertising his machines. This is, once again, things we take for granted. I run a marketing company, paid ads and putting things out there and doing in-person events and things like that. Like that's a playbook that we follow. This is something, especially in the ag industry, that McCormick invented. Like this is a big deal. Like this is the history of our industry, of the dealer and sales networks that exist today were kind of modeled after what was going here with Cyrus McCormick. So just absolutely crazy stuff. So cool to see where it came from. And once again, this is, 150, 160 years ago at this point where this is happening. And we're still living off that model today. So cool. So eventually, Cyrus McCormick is getting older. He's aging. His son is about to take over as we head into what is coined the Harvester Wars. So Cyrus McCormick steps out, and eventually his son, also named Cyrus McCormick, steps in. So I just wanted to stop before we go into this next section here to kind of explain my thought process in creating this podcast, producing this podcast. I don't know if I've explained it well before, but the purpose of this podcast is to, one, highlight people doing exceptional things in our industry, specifically people who are outliers, people who are kind of outside the status quo, who, if you looked at a graph, they're clearly somewhere else in that graph. You can just tell there's something different about them. And why is that? The second thing I want to do with this podcast is provide as much value to whoever's listening as possible. I spend a crap ton of time reading. I spend a crap ton of time learning about our industry. I love reading. I love this industry. And so when I'm producing a podcast like this, I want there to be immense amounts of value for whoever's listening. I'm not trying to summarize this book. I'm not trying to, convince you not to read this book. I would love for you to go read this book. What I want from you is to read this podcast, or what I want from you is to be able to listen to this podcast and gain immense amount of value and learn something from it and say, hey, I want to learn more about that. I want to learn where our industry has been in the past. I want to learn, hey, what's been happening for the past 100 years and how do we get to where we are now? I'm currently, hopefully, going to get a series going on the farm crisis in the 80s sometime next year, because we hear this so much right now is, hey, this is just like the farm crisis in the 80s. Well, I'm asking myself, is it? Is it really that bad? Or is there something else we should be learning from? So what does it look like for us to create content that serves you, someone in our industry who wants to be working at the next level, who wants to be an outlier, who's someone who says, I don't just want to go with the trends. I want to listen, learn, and either be different, excel, or be the best you can be at what you do. So that is why this podcast exists. I put a lot of effort and energy into it to basically no return. So if this is something you enjoyed, if you consider yourself an outlier, if this provided value for you, please leave a review. Please share it with other people. This is a passion project of mine. This is something that, this is stuff I stay up at night excited about. Not that I dread coming to work the next day or doing. I love what I do right now, specifically this podcast. It's one of my favorite things. So if this is something that interests you, you got value from it, please share it with someone else. I would really appreciate it. Guerrilla warfare. With those two words, a veteran salesman for a top McCormick company rival once remembered the competitive conditions that seized the harvester machine industry in the late 19th century. By the mid-1880s, the industry's collective capacity to make machines far exceeded the farmers' needs. The McCormicks and the Deerings and their smaller rivals, all desperate to make sales and keep their factories going, tried everything imaginable to outsell each other and convince the reluctant farmer to buy. So commenced a legendary era, the 2 decades preceding the creation of the International Harvest Company in 1902, known in the trade as the Harvester War. Regional networks of company-owned sales branches, which had replaced independent jobbers by 1890, performed like arsenals, stocked with new machines awaiting sale. Competing armies of machinery agents representing the top manufacturers tromped through rural America, searching for customers to fight over. The tug of war over individual sales became so vicious that salesmen sometimes came to blows. In one incredible scrap, Representatives from three manufacturers, McCormick Harvesting Machinery Company, the Deering Company, and the Champion Company of Ohio, wrestled over the sale of a single binder on a farm in northwestern Iowa. The McCormick agent involved later gave his own heroic account of the battle. Our dealer telegraphed me that Champion agents had pulled into the same field and we had sold an 8-foot McCormick binder, and that they were trying to break up our sale. When I got there, the farmer was in trouble with our machine, and the Champion boys had to put plenty of poison in him about me. Finally, I got it fixed, so the machine worked satisfactorily. But Champion had notified every purchaser of a McCormick binder in the neighborhood to come and see this binder fail, in a machine contest set for the next day, with a view of getting them to cancel their McCormick orders. So that night, I got up at 3 o'clock, drove out to the farm, and woke the farmer up. He put on his pants and came out to the barn, and we had a long talk. I gave him such a sales talk, he was absolutely convinced the McCormick machine was the one he wanted. Meanwhile, a big crowd of machine men had come to the hotel that night, and Deering fellows said they would join the contest too and show us both up. The next day, there were at least 150 farmers there, and the Deering binder was the first to start. They had a brand new machine and 4 big gray horses, and the horses in the machine were decorated with little flags. But when the first bundle of tangled barley came through the binder, it choked, and they were done. The farmer driving our binder was having no trouble. But the Champion dealer got a handful of straw and tried to put it secretly in our elevator trains to prove his claim that our chains would pull grain out of our open elevator and wind it down through the sprockets. I grabbed him by the neck, and he fell down in the stubble. Then the Champion fellow started for me, but somebody got between us. They started to abuse the farmer, who was a big, powerful man, and he struck the Champion dealer. His old father stopped the fight, but the contest broke up in a row, and they left in disgrace without having driven us from the field. In such rivalrous times, a farmer placing a machine order could expect royal treatment from the victorious dealer when machines arrived from the manufacturer. One McCormick man once described how he lavishly feted his customers on the day machines came in. Every man who bought one of our machines was to take delivery of it on the same day. He was to bring his family to town, and we were to give them all a good dinner and a good big day. And the machines were all to be put in line on the street. We had 300 McCormick binders in the procession. It was a beautiful day, as fine as the Lord ever made. I hired 3 bands and put up big banners and streamers across the street. I put 5 or 6 beautiful floats in the parade and rode myself in a big 2-seated carriage. I guess I was a bigger man that day in Carroll than the President of the United States. I engaged all the ladies' aid societies to cook the dinner and hired the theater, gave them a nice little vaudeville turn, and made a speech which the audience was good enough to applaud. I presume because I was paying for it. For the machinery manufacturers, the costs of waging the harvester war grew enormous. Advertising and promotional budgets soared, their networks of company-owned sales branches and branch inventories of machines tied up precious capital. At the same time, even big manufacturers like McCormick couldn't protect themselves from the price-cutting battles. Like companies in many American industries of that day, they tried price-fixing arrangements to insulate themselves from a general post-Civil War decline in wholesale prices that lasted until the mid-1890s. However, such price-fixing attempts always failed because the harvester companies refused to cut production. Consequently, machines' prices dropped precipitously. For instance, a 6-foot binder sold for $325 in 1882. By 1900, an 8-footer sold for as low as $110. As the industry's leader, McCormick could sell its machines at $20 to $50 a premium above the other makes, but the price difference did little to ease pressures. Even McCormick's selling expenses ranged well above 30 to 40% of its total sales. So, this is a crazy time. It kind of resembles our time a little bit, with just dealer lots absolutely full of equipment right now and people fighting over the very few sales that are actually happening right now. And basically, all these harvesting companies are not making money. This is pre 1900s, or right around when the 1900s are about to start. And the industry is in a slump. People are not buying. There's not a need for machines, and all of these companies are overproducing, much like happened in the past few years as we came out of the COVID era and down into the sales slump that agriculture machinery has been in. So basically, no one's making money. People are having to make price cuts. The dealers are having to put on a big old show to get customers, which, by the way, what happened to dealers treating people like that? Oh my gosh. Take them out to a nice dinner, bring their family into town. That's how you should sell machinery that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars today. That's my personal opinion. Anyways, this is also at a time where rapid consolidation is happening. At this time, oil companies are consolidating, steel companies are consolidating, industries across America are rapidly consolidating. and the ag industry is about to tend that way. So there was a couple different talks that happened, a couple different partnerships about either price fixing and things like that, or smaller manufacturers getting together, and they all kind of fizzled out. There was a brief stint where they were working with their competitors, the Deerings, and they called themselves the American Harvester Company. Basically, it fizzled out due to some people want to be bought out and some people want to be president, not president. It was just this weird thing. So that was a very short-lived partnership, but it was foreshadowing what was about to come. So this is where International Harvester truly begins. More than a decade of cat and mouse games ended on July 28th, 1902, when McCormick, Deering, Plano, Milwaukee, and Warder, Bushnell and Glassner companies agreed to combine. Perkins christened the new enterprise the International Harvester Company because three of the merging firms possess extensive overseas operations. The new harvester, the world's largest farm machinery colossus, controlled 85% of U.S. production of the harvesting machines and boasts assets of $110 million. The McCormick concern, by far the most valuable, contributed its Chicago Reaper Works, a new malleable iron plant, a twine factory, and a sawmill, a network of 30 company-owned sales offices, timberlands, hemp properties, and the Illinois Northern Railway. The Deerings similarly offered their Chicago Reaper factory, steel, saw, twine mills, timber and coal, and iron lands. Other facilities donated by the smaller firms include plants in Chicago, Milwaukee, and Springfield, Ohio. International forms, and guys, they control 85% of the machinery, the harvesting market. That's crazy. So just a note here, monopolies are not anything new. We do like to complain about some of the larger players in our industry having control and monopoly over equipment or seed or whatever it may be. None of them are at 85% where it was at during this time. So imagine John Deere today controlling 85% of the harvester market, the John Deere combine market. Imagine basically that being your only option. There are other options, but not really competitive. Very similar to at least how I hear the cotton picker market is. John Deere has a ridiculous market share in that market, just because no one really makes those things anymore. Just a note there. All right, so we have a company that controls 85% of the harvesting market. What do you do next when you control 85% of the harvesting market? So during this time, the son of Cyrus McCormick Jr., is still president, and he is ready to invest. He is ready to go big. He's ready to continue to grow their operation. So at this time, they end up going into trucks at this time. Cars and trucks are becoming a thing. They're going to get into the market of tractors here in a little bit and gasoline engines. They also are expanding overseas, creating an overseas market, hence the international name. Cyrus McCormick is trying to reinvest for the long term to shore up the company's position. So by 1910, Harvester's crucial but costly expansion into overseas markets and new products like tractors, trucks, and gasoline engines had ensured the company's success. In all, the firms had spent $28 million, amount to nearly half the value of its physical properties at the merger, time to diversify itself, and the results were plain. Between 1905 and 1910, Harvester's total sales nearly doubled, growing from $55 million to $101 million, while profits jumped eightfold to $16.1 million. The company had shaken free of its early dependence on the domestic market for harvesters. Foreign sales and the sales of new products had grown to compromise nearly 2/3 of the company's sales volume. In comparison with its industrial peers, Harvester had made it. In 1909, Harvester's assets of $172 million placed it fourth in size among American corporations. Only U.S. Steel, Standard Oil, and the American Tobacco Companies, all industrial amalgamations, were bigger. Such hallmarks of the Harvester's success inevitably became grist for muckraking journalists, farmers protesting monopoly in the industry, and most of all, the trustbusters, who had stepped up efforts to prosecute industrial violators of the Sherman Act during Theodore Roosevelt's administration. And the Federal Bureau of Corporations had launched an investigation into Harvester in 1906. As long as Roosevelt remained president, however, Perkins, an influential fundraiser for the Republican Party, found sympathy at the White House for his campaign to promote Harvester as a good rather than evil trust. Inside the company, he pushed along development of an impressive array of employee pension and profit sharing and sickness and accident insurance plans when he publicly claimed the programs were proof of the sort of progressive partnership between management and labor possible when a good trust like Harvester could operate in an environment unburdened by its fierce competition. So, back then, which is also frequent now, there are some Department of Justice investigations also going on right now in our industry into some equipment manufacturers. The same thing is happening to Harvester back in the day. Theodore Roosevelt was known for as a trust buster, trying to get some of these big companies broken up. Um, some to some success, some to not some success. Basically, Perkins, who was one of the high ups at Harvester at the time, had good inroads with the Republican Party, and was able to kind of get the government off their back a little bit, kind of, sort of. But anyways, once again, it's all about who you know. It's not what you know; it's who you know. Harvester manages to get out of this without getting broken up. But once again, just like I read there, like many of the same sentiments that people have now in our industry existed back then. I have been reading a lot of Twitter comments lately of people calling for DOJ investigations into all the large companies in ag, claiming that they have a monopoly and that they are price fixing. I'm not saying that's not happening, but I am saying that is something that has been accused or been happening in the past already. So once again, we can learn, hey, our industry has been fighting this for over 100 years, guys. This is not new. So they managed to get out of that. The company is doing very well. Once again, fourth largest in the country at the time. So there was a time when the fourth largest company in America was International Harvester, which is just crazy to think about now, considering it's lumped in as Case IH now, not International Harvester. So we'll continue to learn about that fall and how that happened. But we're about to move into the tractor era, one of the most pivotal eras in agriculture. The tractor is largely attributed to the thing that broke most of society away from having to be agriculturalists. The tractor, legendary invention, and we all know this is where it gets fun. This is where John Deere really starts to make a name for themselves. Ford will also be making a name for themselves in this category. Uh, there will be lots of machinery manufacturers that will pop up in and out of this story. But for the most part, at this time, International Harvester was the big dog. So something important is going to have to happen with them. We're about to learn what that is. So we get through the 1900s. World War One comes and goes. There's tussles with the government. The son of Cyrus McCormick Jr., retired. And there's a new CEO that comes in. His name is Alexander Legge, or Legge, Legge. I don't remember how it's said. We're just going to call him Alexander for now, because I'm not going to say his name properly. He had been a part of Harvester for a long time. He worked in their sales organization, kind of a legend within the organization. Very sales focused, very marketing focused. But overall, plays a huge role. There's more books on International Harvester that I did not get a chance to read yet that I would love to read. But he plays a big start in the story. Anyways, new CEO, Alexander's in charge, and the tractor market is here. The tractor market is starting to explode, and Harvester is losing ground. Ford had entered the market with their Fordson tractor and was rapidly taking market from their competitors. And this did not sit well with Alexander. And so here's what the book tells us. After the war, the great threat to Harvester's tractor business was Detroit automaker who had taught the world about mass production. Henry Ford, after a decade of tinkering with prototypes, Ford manufactured his first mass-produced Fordson tractor in 1917. He sold more than 7,000 Fordsons overseas to help feed the British during the war before he introduced them to the American farmers in 1918. The year Ford knocked Harvester from its prized top position in the domestic market. Within 2 years, he claimed 2/3 of the market. Fordson, much lighter than the other tractors on the market, exemplifies Detroit know-how. It proved Harvester's engineers had a lot to learn about the refinements of internal combustion, heat treatment of steel, strength of materials, and the standardization of parts. Ford's example behooved Harvester and the old line makers of farm equipment to revamp their ancient production methods for the precision machining requirements of the tractor. Reaping economies in production, Ford shattered the tractor industry, already undergoing a shakeout with repeated price slashings. By 1922, the price on a Fordson dropped $230 to a level of $395. Ford effectively broadcasting his willingness to lose money on tractors to keep production going. Ford's action infuriated Alexander, who was inspecting new company facilities in Springfield, Ohio, when he received a call from Chicago headquarters. What's that? How much? $230? Well, I'll be, he explained, realizing that Harvester's futures in tractors, indeed its traditional leadership in farm machinery, was now at stake. He reckoned Harvester had no choice but to sell below cost too. What will we do about it? Do? Why, damn, it'll all meet him, of course. We're going to stay in the tractor business. Yes. Cut $230. Both Harvester models. Yes, both. Then Alexander brilliantly upped the ante. Ford was so low, the Harvester tractor still left a price gap of $275. Yet Alexander knew the American farmer way better than Henry Ford and could offer more than tractors. Several years before, Harvester had rounded out its product line by purchasing two plow makers, Parlin and Orendorff Company of Canton, Illinois, the third largest in the country, and the Shenandoah Plow Company in Tennessee. Say, listen, Alexander told the caller, make it good. We'll throw in a plow as well. He then took the contest to the farmlands where he employed the tactics he learned in the Harvester Wars. Whenever a Harvester salesman learned of a Fordson sale, it became his duty to challenge his competition to a tractor contest. Harvester salesmen argued that unlike existing Harvester tractors in the market, the Fordson was too light to gain traction, needed to pull a 14-inch plow, and failed in uneven soil conditions. After thousands of contests, Alexander's men started to win back customers. However, his best answer to Ford can be expressed in one word. All right, guys, this is where it's going to get good. Farmall. That name, one of the most famous in the industry's history, stood for a revolutionary new type of machine, the all-purpose tractor. Unlike competing machines, the Farmall could do all sorts of light farm work and for the first time made possible the horseless farm. It could push a cultivator through the soil, pull a plow, transmit power to an implement through a power takeoff, and the supply belt to a stationary silo or threshing machine. In contrast to the Fordson, which was ill-suited for cultivating row crops. The Farmall was specifically designed for row crop work. Its high rear-wheel drive provided maximum clearance over crops, and its narrow front wheels were designed to run between the rows. Farmall's versatility not only spelled the end of the era of the farm horse, but also promised the farmer huge savings on his equipment investment by reducing the need for more than one tractor. Alexander knew developing the Farmall would be costly but essential to Harvester's commitment to leadership. As Harold McCormick once said of Alexander, he would not spend $1 on building designed to impress the public with the magnitude of the corporation. To his mind, the sort of symbolism was a waste of good money. On the other hand, he would allot millions and perhaps tens of millions for the expansion and engineering developments. No machinery that would cut to the cost of production or improve the quality of the product was too expensive for him. The upshot was 20 experimental Farmalls and attached cultivators, mowers, and corn planters and binders, all assembled by hand at great expense, were planned for 1922. And at Alexander's insistence, engineers designed the tractors to accommodate Harvester implements already on the market. Despite the Ford madness, Alexander resisted temptation to introduce the Farmalls until satisfied that they could prove their muster in the field. Engineers worked out design problems, earning numerous patents, and puttered over another generation of test models before the company sold its first Farmall to an Iowa farmer in 1924. By the end of the 1920s, Alexander had clearly reclaimed Harvester's preeminence in agriculture machinery. The wave of consolidations among tractor makers and farm implement manufacturers during the decade had left the industry dominated by a handful of giants who both possessed strong distribution networks and offered the farmer a full line of equipment. Giant among giants was Harvester, whose domestic farm equipment sales of $150 million in 1929 were nearly triple of those its nearest competitors, Deere & Co. of Moline, Illinois. The Farmall. The Farmall is a legendary tractor. The name is still around today in the case lineup somewhere. I can't remember which tractor it is, but it still exists. The namesake still extends on. But this was a prime example of Alexander, the CEO, saying, we got two options. We can either continue to build and show face and maintain and be stale and not innovate, or we can spend all the money building a phenomenal product that's in tune with our farmers and sell. Okay. Key word here, he was in tune with the farmers. He knew what they needed. Harvester as a company knew what farmers needed better than Ford did. And so it did something also crazy. It waited until the product was right to release. They did not rush out the Farmall, which is a mistake they're going to make later. They released the Farmall when it was ready. And keyword, they made sure it worked with implements already on the market. Okay. We take for granted now that everything has a PTO shaft or it hooks up to a 3-point, or it has one of the hitches. Okay. And it just works. Okay. Back then, standardization was still becoming a thing. The idea of a full line equipment manufacturer was still becoming a thing. The consolidation's happening, but Deere and Harvester are beginning the hey, let's acquire all these implement makers to make sure we have a full line of equipment. So this is that era. And so when the Farmall comes on the scene and can attach to the full line of equipment, it standardizes a ton of things. And so that's why the Farmall was so legendary at the time and why it could beat Ford, because they knew what the farmers wanted and it worked with the existing implements and did not require further reinvestment of new stuff. It worked. And so that's how Harvester was able to dominate the tractor market as well. They were in touch with the people who they needed to be in touch with, and they had the right products at the right time, and they didn't rush them. So Harvester's on top, nearly triple the profits of its nearest competitor, Deere. So once again, International Harvester is much larger than John Deere at this point, and it's a good time. But good times can't last forever. And if you know anything about the 1930s, then you know this. The Great Depression is about to kick off. Dust Bowl is about to happen. World War II is around this category. There's a lot of things that are about to happen in the ag industry, in the world as a whole. And good times cannot last forever. So what happens next? So during the 1920s, farmers had pressured Washington to take a more active role in their market through price supports on agricultural products. In early 1929, the newly elected president, Herbert Hoover, who opposed direct relief to farmers, countered with a program intended to stabilize the market indirectly. He looked to Harvester for exclusive talent to orchestrate a scheme and chose Alexander Legge that year to chair the new Federal Farm Board. Resigning from Harvester, Alexander attacked his new task with all, uh, all clarity, becoming one of the most controversial people in the nation. His rough prairie humor titillated Washington society, and his face appeared on the cover of Time magazine. While farmers across the country attacked his policies, as the Farm Board's chief, Legge made loans to stabilization corporations that were supposed to help temper the effects of seasonal commodity price swings through the purchase, sale, and storage of commodities. But his advice to wheat planters that they reduce production amid crashing crop prices and rising surpluses did not go over well in the grain belt. Farmers retorted that the government should buy up wheat until the price returned to 60 cents a bushel. The immensity of the farmer's plight soon proved too much for Herbert Hoover's farm board. Commodity prices kept crashing, ruining the ineffectiveness of the board's stabilization corporations, and farmers' income dropped a harrowing 70% in 3 years. The agency disbanded in defeat in 1932. Alexander, retreating to his old job at Harvester, died the following year of a heart attack. The farmers' woes were just one sign of the onset of the Great Depression, which prostrated the nation's economy for a decade and left even corporate giants like Harvester powerless to avert losses. Between 1929 and 1932, Harvester's domestic sales dropped 78% to 59 million. While in the wake of the stock market crash of 1929, the price of its common stock fell from its peak of $142 a share to a low of $10.37. For the year 1932, when the nation's industrial output was half of its 1929 level and nearly a quarter of the American workforce was jobless, Harvester reported a loss of $7.6 million, the first in its 30-year history as a corporation. Another $1.9 million loss in 1933, and the company's earnings did not recover to their 1929 level of $37 million until after World War II. During this time, lots of Harvester workers get laid off. The economic travails were not great. Alexander steps down, and Fowler McCormick, Cyrus's grandson, steps in as CEO. One of the first moves was to diversify. Fowler wanted to change things around, taking over in the time of Great Depression. No one's buying anything. You're losing money. Obviously, your first thought is, can we get out of this industry or diversify our income so that way we're not so beholden to the ag economy? It's not a new thing in our industry. Once again, there's lots of big companies that have diversified out of our industry and then come back and then blah, blah, blah. There's a bunch of stories that go on there. Um, but that's what he wanted to do. Also, at this time, labor unions are gaining a lot of ground. Harvester, I could do a whole episode on just Harvester's relationship with labor unions. There's a huge section of this book just talking about the strikes they had, the unions' demands, the relations with leadership, and dealing with unions. There's a lot of stuff that happens there. It happens all over the place too, between Deere and Cat and all these other big manufacturers at the time. Same with Ford and GM. Lots of stuff happening there. I won't get too into detail. But labor relations had a continuing role. Some people who worked for Harvester thought it was great. Other people thought it was awful. Leadership, from just the reading, did a pretty good job of trying to take care of their employees. But once again, I mean, we're looking 100 years in the past. It's hard to tell what was really going on. Just quick reference from the book to men like Botyan. He was a worker. He worked in the steel mill. I think his name was John Botyan. To men like Botyan, Harvester loomed as a hostile institution, indifferent to the problems of its workers. Even company health officials seemed unsympathetic. Once, when a red hot rivet landed on Botyan's arm, scarring him for life, he sought help from the company's doctor. Botyan recalls, the doctor, I could have killed him. He says, what? You haven't been working? Like I'm supposed to be back to heating rivets? I said, no, I can't even bend my arm, he says. Oh my, terrible, and bandaged it all up. These doctors wanted to get you back working just as long as you could stand up. They were company hired, and that's the way it was. They didn't care for the man anyhow. Botyan's resentment deepened during the Depression when he joined thousands of unemployed harvester workers facing a desperate struggle for survival. Laid off in 1930, he maintains that employees with connections returned to their jobs first, but he wasn't called back until 1934. Harvester management, hardly uncaring during those harsh times, attempted a series of measures to ease the lives of its workers like Botyan. The corporation intermittently boosted plant production beyond what the market could bear, so long service employees on layoff could return to work. It hired a traveling nurse to visit the sick, made loans to the unemployed against their future earnings, and in one long remembered instance of compassion, offered its city's workers free garden plots to grow food. In Chicago, Fort Wayne, Milwaukee, Auburn, and Canton, Harvest released more than 1,000 tillable acres of urban land and offered each participant a fourth of an acre to cultivate food and tools and seeds if he couldn't afford them. So, once again, yeah, he wanted to diversify. Fowler, the CEO at the time. Some people loved Harvester, some people didn't like it. Union relationships will continue to be tense throughout the rest of Harvester's career, or Harvester's tenure as its own company before it gets assembled. All this is happening, but Fowler McCormick wants to diversify. So, as a victorious America bursts forth from the war, secure in its emergence as the world's greatest economic power. So, comes out of World War II. America's superpower, we all know. The Great Depression and the Dust Bowl and World War II are some of the most pivotal events in America's history. If you guys haven't read up on it, there's a great book called The Worst Hard Times by Timothy Egan on the Dust Bowl, which explains a lot of it. A lot of our programs for subsidies and the way all of the companies in our industry actually act is largely based on some of the stuff that happened in the New Deal, and kind of band-aids from the Great Depression and after effects of World War II. So I can't get into that today, but highly recommend that book if you guys want. It's a great audiobook. Highly recommend. One of the best books I've read in the ag industry as a whole, but it will help kind of frame what I'm talking about. So, as victorious America's burst forth from the war, secure in its emergence as the world's greatest economic power, Fowler McCormick attempted to chart an ambitious course for the modern harvester. During the late 1940s, he presided over an aggressive $225 million expansion program that stretched harvesters' imagination to embrace 6 new plants in the United States, 30,000 more employees, and 2 emerging markets that were diversifications from its traditional lines. Yet McCormick lacked the perseverance to see his dream come to fruition. McCormick didn't neglect Harvester's historic farm equipment and truck business. In farm equipment, he gambled that the renewed demands of small farmers in the southern United States would offer the company its brightest opportunity. The South, a poor cousin of the fertile Midwest, was just starting to convert from animal power to tractor power. Harvester bought a plant in Louisville, Kentucky to make small farm hauls for southern farmers and extended the southern line by erecting a new factory in Memphis, Tennessee. Here at Memphis, Harvester went into production on the industry's first successful line of mechanical cotton pickers. For Harvester's truck business, second only to the farm equipment in size, the company leased manufacturing space in Emeryville, California. West Coast truckers, accustomed to carrying exceptionally large loads, demanded huge vehicles, and Harvester's new Emeryville, its biggest truck to date, soon fit the bill. Unlike the heavy duties Fort Wayne punched out in volume, Emeryvilles were custom built, an emergency concept for the truck industry. A trucker gearing his Emeryville specifically to haul oil machinery or big timber could choose from a wide variety of components such as Eaton axles, Spicer gearboxes, Cummins engines, and Hendrickson's driving wheel assemblies. However, McCormick's biggest ambitions for Harvester involved diversification. First and foremost, he gave the company the company's emerging sideline construction equipment a big boost. Harvester began selling tractors for road building projects since the 1910s, but started getting serious about construction equipment in 1928 when it offered its first tractor on tracks rather than wheels. So, yeah, during this time, there is a lot going on at Harvester. Post World War II, we got the truck division. If you guys don't know, International Trucks, I mean, it's still around today, owned under Navistar, basically a completely different company. International Trucks are absolutely legendary. Some of the older International trucks are some of the most beautiful things ever made. I love them personally, but the Harvester truck business is only second in size to the machinery business at this point. So I believe is a little later on, Harvester becomes the largest heavy-duty truck manufacturer in America above all the others. So International is a monster in the truck business. They're a monster in the tractor business, and they are starting to get into the construction business as well. So in the construction industry, we obviously know the big player in that industry is Cat, but Case is second there right now, which is crazy. So they built a crawler tractor called the TD41. Billed as the world's most powerful tractor, this diesel-powered earth-moving monster weighed more than 20 tons, delivered 140 horsepower, and soon appeared by the thousands as the prime actor in the big post-war construction projects. The TD24 even intimidated the crawler king Cat, whose competing D8 model had less power. As if the pursuit of the construction market weren't enough to satiate Fowler McCormick's appetite for leadership in the new age, he also dared to pursue the American consumer, a tantalizing prospect in the rush of post-war prosperity. This is a misstep that's about to go on. You're not going to realize it yet, but it will be a misstep. He fancied Harvester as a maker of home refrigeration appliances. At first blush, the idea appeared a logical outgrowth of the Harvester's historical role as a supplier of dairy machines. Since 1907, Harvester had been making cream separators for dairy farmers. In the mid-1930s, after many states passed laws requiring milk to be cooled within an hour after milking, the company also came out with a line of coolers. In 1940, Harvester offered its first walk-in coolers through its farm equipment dealers, and McCormick soon reckoned it was time to respond. In 1945, the company's board of directors gave approval for the purchase of a plant and site and construction facilities that could turn out 210 cubic foot freezer chests a day. The following year, Harvester bought a plant in Evansville, Indiana, and later extended its appliance line to include air conditioners and dehumidifiers. So, if you didn't know, International also used to make home appliances. I've seen some of these on Facebook before, and my goodness, I wish that I had my hands on an International fridge. It would be one of the coolest things ever. If we ever have an office, I will go to great expense to buy a fridge that has International Harvester on the front of it. I believe it would probably just say International from the ones I've seen. It'd be sweet. But they get into refrigeration and they get into air conditioners, dehumidifiers, because they think, oh, we can be the home appliance people as well. We can just sell it all through our dealers. We can own the rural American home, basically. At this time, there was also a lot of tension mounting between McCormick and his COO, McCaffrey. And this is not going to spell well for McCormick at the time. So McCormick had ambitious plans to make changes, but often took his hands off the wheel, which was not sitting well. Read a little quote for you. In all, Fowler McCormick had great dreams for Harvester. Those dreams assumed that the corporation would diversify itself by taking the lessons of leadership it had learned as the world's top producer of farm equipment and applying them elsewhere. Harvester would make a vast array of heavy equipment for the construction contractor, freezers, dehumidifiers, air conditioners, and the like for the American housewife. Trucks of every size, shape, and use for everybody from pickup drivers to long-distance haulers. In the meantime, the dream, suppose, Harvester would maintain its preeminence in the agricultural equipment space, keeping American farmers supplied with top equipment and service. Such dreams required an attentive leader to bring them to fulfillment. However, Fowler McCormick lacked the personal dedication to see them through and often left Harvester in the hands of his subordinates. Though both chairman and chief executive, he considered himself free to work wherever he wished and often far from the Harvester's Chicago headquarters. Even his expansion program got its start while he was away in Canada. Such creative ideas are better generated in an atmosphere of quiet than in the hurly-burly office he once claimed. So, this is all happening. Uh, McCormick liked to spend time away. He spent a lot of time in Europe. His spouse struggled with depression, and so they would go over there, and she would get treated by a doctor over there. There's a whole huge story that could happen there. Their family marries into the Rockefeller family as well. Total side note in history: there is a biography on Cyrus McCormick the first, who I would love to do a series on at some point. Don't have time. More or less, basically, not there all the time. He has these great plans, great ambitions, but he says, I think this is where we should go. I'm going to dip out for a few weeks, maybe a month or two, and I'll be back. Make sure you guys got everything going. And this causes a lot of tension between his board and his number two, McCaffrey, who is currently the COO of the corporation. So all this stuff is boiling over. There's a power struggle going on between the two of them. But the partnership had failed as a power struggle erupted between the two men, culminating in early 1951 when McCormick attempted to seek McCaffrey's removal. McCormick's trying to remove McCaffrey from his position. He offered McCaffrey, then 58, one of two unpleasant options: retirement at 60 or the inactive post of vice chairman. When McCaffrey refused McCormick's terms, McCormick confidently took his case to Harvester's board of directors that spring, expecting their friendly and understanding support. When he demanded that the board choose between him and McCaffrey, on May 1st that year, McCormick quietly gave his ultimatum to the two influential directors on the executive committee, John Wilson, an attorney for McCormick, and Judson F. Stone, a trustee for various McCormick estates. According to Fowler McCormick's diary, Wilson and Stone expressed shock at his request and insisted that all five outside directors on the committee take up the matter. A week later, the five met. Afterwards, in McCormick's words, they inferred that if they had to choose between me and McCaffrey, they would choose him. To McCormick's bitter surprise, his on-again, off-again pursuit of his job duties apparently had destroyed his credibility with the board. Ironically, the outside directors offered the chief executive post to McCaffrey and suggested McCormick remain as an inactive chairman. Insulted, McCormick resigned as chairman on May 28th, ending nearly half a century of McCormick family direction of the company. So McCormick's been here for 25 years, and he basically gets kicked out by his board. They say, no, we want your COO. He's the one who's actually been running things. From our view, he's the one who's been making sure stuff gets done, not you. And so if you're going to force us to choose, you're out, McCormick. Your granddad started this company, but we need someone to run it. So McCaffrey is in charge now, and once again, things are about to get shook up. So we are coming out of a rapid age of diversification. The board doesn't think that McCormick could handle it, so they say, McCaffrey, you're number two. You're in charge now. So McCaffrey is gonna do some big changes. Once again, a big sales guy. Sales guys seem to have quite a bit of sway in this business, but he's gonna do some stuff. So McCaffrey ran Harvester like an autocrat and refused to let anybody stand between him and a sale. A former executive remembers a time in 1949 when McCaffrey stopped at the company's tillage tool plant in Stockton, California, to find out why the factory couldn't supply the local sales district with its new line of disc harrows. When the plant personnel indicated they needed a report approved by Farm Equipment Division executives in Chicago before buying the new products to market, McCaffrey demanded the plant manager to produce a copy of the report. Unmindful of the Chicago executives he would undercut, McCaffrey promptly signed the report. When the plant's controller objected that his boss still hadn't signed, McCaffrey thundered, "Isn't John L. McCaffrey enough? Do it!" Exclamation point. During the McCaffrey years, salesmen virtually ran Harvester and kept a stranglehold on the company decision-making that persisted long after he retired. A brotherhood of McCaffrey's old associates from the sales ranks infiltrated Harvester's executive echelon in the late 1940s and 1950s. The whims of the sales department becoming corporate priorities created a complex of costly problems affecting virtually every aspect of the company's engineering, manufacturing, finance, and labor relations. So he's super salesy. For years, he is basically running Harvester like a stranglehold. He's got his arms around it. He's saying, this is how it's going to be done. So basically, at this time, he's selling everything as much as he can. He wants to sell. He wants to build a strong sales organization first. First and foremost, McCaffrey is building a strong sales organization. And the unfortunate part is he did it at the neglect of the technological and investment side of their business. And it was just about this time when Harvester's distant number 2 competitor starts to step up its game. So once again, we see, okay, hands off the wheel in the wrong place. Or the right place. Wrong place? No, right. Wrong place. So unlike Alexander Legge, who said, hey, we have competitors, we need to reinvest in our equipment to make sure we have good products for people to sell, and I'm not going to rush them out the door, McCaffrey basically does the opposite. He says, no, our sales are what's going to drive us. We're low on sales, make more sales. Don't make a better product, make more sales. So at this point, Harvester's huge, diversified. Harvester basically has all these different divisions. They're in construction, they're in trucks, they're in agriculture equipment, obviously. They're in appliances. They have a bunch of other things. They have some steel mills that supply their plants. They're outdated. There's a bunch of stuff going on. And basically, they're at this point where it's so big, it's hard to focus. And so they're just trying to make sales on sales and sales. And McCaffrey is trying to build the organization that way. Sell, sell, sell. At this time, they're not reinvesting the way they should. They're not in touch with their market. And we're going to see John Deere is gonna come in and start making some waves. So Harvester's distant number 2 is here. Such long-standing loyalty is the cornerstone of Harvester's number 1 market position in the agricultural equipment sector. In 1951, when John McCaffrey became chief executive. However, Harvester made too many blunders in the farm equipment in the post-war era to maintain the loyalty of customers less devoted than Howard Harshberger. By the late 1850s, Harvester faced increasingly fierce competition from a lineup of other full-line companies, such as Deere & Co. of Moline and Massey Ferguson of Toronto, while scrappy short-line manufacturers were also stealing shares of the market. No company, however, presented a greater threat than Deere. In 1958, the year McCaffrey retired, U.S. sales of Harvester's red equipment ranked behind Deere's green for the first time. Like Cyrus McCormick's Reaper, Deere's plow wasn't unique in its day. Like McCormick, Deere was a gifted marketer who promoted his plow through the advertisement at agricultural fairs and built a strong organization of traveling sales agents. His son Charles, who succeeded him, the inventor as head of Deere Co., anticipated the eventual rise of full-line farm equipment firms by expanding Deere's product line to include corn planters, harrows, cultivators, stock cutters, other implements, and wagons. When networks of sales branches sprang up throughout the industry in the late 1800s, Charles invited the company employees and outside businessmen to invest with him in Deere's growing branch chain. By the end of the century, Deere stood as the first full-line distributor of farm equipment and the largest manufacturer of plows and tillage implements in the country. After Charles died in 1907, his vision of Deere & Co. as a full-line company comprised of independently run entities long survived him. During the turn of the century merger craze in the farm implement industry, Deere & Co. approached the goal of full-line manufacture by consolidating its product lines with those of 7 other manufacturers in 1911. 7 years later, the new enterprise took a big step that signals Deere's crucial entry into the tractor business. The $2.1 million purchase of the Waterloo Gasoline Engine Company of Iowa. I live in Waterloo, Iowa, so I think this is super cool. The original Waterloo Gasoline Engine Company, all that's just down the road from here. Deere's original factories from this era are 2 minutes from my house. Like I turn out on this road and I go left, and then I follow that road and I make a right. John Deere's tractor museum is there, which used to be a factory, and then they have a bunch of these places called Tech Works. There's a hotel and everything now. They're old brick buildings that used to have factories in them. Super fascinating. Anyways, side note. Not only did the loyalty color not hold up for Harvester, Deere also did what Harvester did not. They were in touch with their customers. They knew tractors were coming. They were going to make a big investment, so they did it. Once again, Deere's the scrappy number 2 player in this situation. And they said, we're going to buy what we need to compete in this space. We know people want tractors. Let's buy the Waterloo Engine Company. Okay? So Deere also clearly did something that Harvester did not. Its focus was on the ag equipment sector first and foremost, and nothing else. Not trucks, not appliances, not the vestiges that Harvester had. Farm equipment. So during this time, John Deere built a state-of-the-art headquarters in Moline with a wall of history exhibit with displays of its history and products, and it was used as a tool to reinforce their commitment to their keyword here, customers. This is a quote. Such daily pressures on employees helped reinforce the company's ancient links with the American farmer. Significantly, Harvester's corporate executives, stationed in Chicago throughout the company's history, lost touch with its roots. One former farm equipment executive at Harvester once reflected, one of the good things about Deere is the geographic awareness. Because of most of their corporate executives live on a farm or near one, Harvester executives ride down to work at 401 North Michigan Avenue on the train. They don't see a farm except maybe once a year when they take a vacation. It's difficult for folks at 401 North Michigan to relate to the farmer's mentality, but Deere got farm all around it. Those guys walk through a history book walk through history of agriculture before they get to their offices. So Deere has an office that is showcasing the history of their machines and the people they're building them for. So their employees are going to work and they're seeing this every day. That's just wild. Make sure I'm still recording. So Deere at this time also started to build out their dealer network, which is once again a big deal. Harvester originally had the best dealer network in the industry. Their dealer network was huge. They were kind of foundational in the way they built their sales network. But this is 100 years from now, and a lot has changed, and there's a lot going on. And so Deere builds out the dealer network in a way that to this day they're still kind of coasting on. That sounds awful, but it's true. There's a lot of yeah, it's just absolutely crazy seeing this now of like, oh, that started back then, and that's why we are here where we are today. So Deere is making better machines. They're more in touch with their customer. They're starting to take market share. And on top of that, they're building a phenomenal dealer network. Deere first outclassed Harvester in service as the industry modernized its dealer organizations after World War II. The origins of Deere's superior network can be traced to the late 1930s when Harvester's organization dominated the market with some 11,000 dealers across the United States. Deere's second-ranked dealer body was 7,000 strong at the time. In those days, dealers generally worked out of hardware stores, harness shops, and small storefronts. In a typical community where the farmer might have a couple Deere dealers to choose from, competition was just as keen between two dealers as between Deere and Harvester dealers. Before the war, however, Deere's sales branch managers, who ran their operations like entrepreneurs in the old Deere tradition, gradually convinced the company that one large, financially strong dealer would accomplish more in the long run than several shaky small dealers scrapping over each other's business. As the size of farms increased, farmers sought bigger dealerships who could handle their needs for bigger equipment. Newly paved roads made them willing to travel farther for service. Eventually, Deere's idea became codified as its key dealer program. Boyd Bartlett, a top-tier executive who started in sales, remembers how the key dealer program came to Barron County, Wisconsin, where his father was one of the several dealers. Company marketing people came into our county and Chippewa and Polk counties nearby and decided that where all the key trade towns were. Some were county seat towns, which would provide a dealer with enough customer base so he could make a viable business. Then these people went in and had talks with dealers that were there. If the dealer was the kind of person who was financially strong and could grow, they encouraged him to be our long-term dealer. I know my father's balance sheet wasn't that strong, but he was about 40 years old at the time, and I think they saw in him a guy with determination to make it and expand. In turn, the company promised his father reasonable terms on his parts and equipment inventories and the business advice to help him succeed. When existing dealers in strategic locations failed to live up to expectations, Deere recruited individuals with capital and business smarts to replace them. Dealers in communities deemed poor locations were encouraged to sell out. Later, the key dealer program evolved into a corporate priority. Bartlett, who left his father's dealership to join Deere in 1952, recalls, in the middle 50s, we took some bold steps to ensure that this key dealer program happened properly. We shrank the size of sales territories a key man would handle so he had more time to work with each dealer. For instance, in 1953, when I was a new territory manager in North Dakota, I had 20 dealers to call on. 3 years later, I had 15. In Hewitt's time, Deere stepped up training for territory managers so they could better counsel dealers on the nitty gritty problems of parts ordering, parts stocking, inventory turnover, and the like. The company also placed parts specialists and technicians in the territories to help managers on service calls. Eventually, Deere held business improvement seminars for dealership owners and their top parts and service people. By the early 1960s, Deere had built out the finest dealership network in the industry. It had transformed the old motley array of 7,000 Depression-era shops into a financially sophisticated force of large specialty farm equipment dealers, numbering about half as many. So at this time, Deere or Harvester is also trying to update their dealer network, but it comes a lot, yeah, it's a lot more confusing. They said dealers build bigger shops, build bigger uh, lots so you can sell more equipment, have more on hand. They basically are saying spend a bunch of money on your own behalf. And they're not offering the same support uh, that they probably should have. Because Harvester at the same time is also focused on trucks and refrigeration and all that stuff they're selling. So Harvester is distracted by said diversification, which was meant to prevent further downward spirals. So, Harvester was also distracted at the time. At the same time, Harvester's preoccupation with the growth of its truck and refrigeration businesses hurt its image in farm machinery as the company forced its farm equipment salesmen to peddle its other lines as well. Conversely, Deere salesmen stuck with their old specialty farm equipment. One former Deere salesman recalls, I felt very comfortable working for Deere. I drove a company car out on the territory. My local counterpart at Harvester got told, you will drive a Harvester pickup truck, and in the back of the pickup truck, you will carry a refrigerator so that you can talk to all your dealers about the fact that we're in the refrigeration business. He resented that. It was kind of demeaning. The upshot was Harvester failed to win the hearts of its dealers like Deere did. But Harvester also relinquished its market leadership because it failed to meet the American farmers' post war demand for bigger equipment. Stanley F. Lancaster, a former executive in Harvester's farm equipment division, admits, we were so slow and dumb. Our strength was so predominant, we thought we always would be that way regardless of what we did. They got complacent. You can't ever get complacent when you are running a business, any sort of business, whether you're farming, whether you're running some sort of ag business, whether you're in any other industry. Don't get complacent. Like, these guys thought they had it all because they were so big and they were number one for so long. Unfortunately, maybe not unfortunately, I think that resembles Deere a lot today. There's a lot of things that I see big companies, specifically in agriculture, getting complacent in, and people are kind of getting fed up with it, and they will eventually get fed up to the point where they'll spend their dollars elsewhere. Guys, Harvester had 85% of the harvesting market at one point. Deere has roughly 56 to 60% of the U.S. tractor market. We can call them that monopoly, and if their service declines far enough, something will happen. Something will shift, will happen. So just remember, maybe it's going to take 60, 70 years, but it can happen and it can change. So basically, this is all happening at the same time. Bigger equipment's coming, and International Harvester is falling behind. I'm about to say Case. International Farm Harvester is falling behind, and they need to come out with something that's going to meet the expectations. Okay, so we're heading in the 50s now. There is need for a big tractor, and so Harvester says, well, we got to do that. So design for big equipment leaped off the drawing board in no time as the company rushed to bring out new products. In 1957, the year before Harvester's farm equipment sales slipped below Deere's, Mark Heeler, Harvester's vice president for farm equipment, explaining the company's employee publication, if we are to keep in front, we must definitely make more changes than we made back in the days when the Farm All M was so supreme. Many of our new machines have had to be programmed quickly, and we've been able to circumvent channels which formerly were necessary in trying to get approvals. In their haste, the farm equipment people prematurely let loose to company dealers a big tractor that would blacken Harvester's proud reputation. Introduced in 1958, significantly the year Deere's U.S. sales of farm equipment talked harvesters for the first time, the notorious Farmall 560 wasn't fully engineered for heavy jobs. John Kinzenbaugh, an Iowa farm manufacturer of farm implements, recalls they took the chassis and transmission of the M model and built the Hot Rod 560 tractor from it, putting a 6-cylinder engine on it. The engine overpowered the drivetrain originally designed for the 4-cylinder farm all and tore it apart. When the 560s around the country failed in farmers' fields, Harvester found itself in the midst of a product recall nightmare. A retired farm equipment executive adds, the problem was so great that our dealers could not carry out the modification program alone. It was just more than they could handle. So we had it done at various collection points where they could bring these tractors in and rebuild them. The fiasco, a byproduct of the McCaffrey sales mania, tainted Harvester's big name in big tractors and infuriated Frank Jenks, who succeeded McCaffrey in 1958. They rushed a good thing. Unlike the Farmall from earlier in Harvester's career, they looked at the big tractor as something we got to get to the market. We got to the market. They didn't wait till it was fixed, till it was ready. They put out a sloppy product and it broke down on farmers and it caused issues. That I think is one of the major downfalls of what they did. They were not in touch with their consumers. They said they don't need a big tractor, and then all of a sudden they need a big tractor, and so they rush it to market. And now we see the downfall of International Harvester continuing to go. Okay. After the war, Deere surveyed American farmers and discovered their desired nimbler, more powerful tractors with comfortable seats and that were easy to operate. They also wanted transmissions with at least 6 speeds, bigger fuel tanks, and less frequent fuel ups, and better hydraulics. In 1953, a secret team of Deere engineers started to work to develop a machine. 7 years later, Hewitt called all of Deere's North American dealers to Dallas for the splashy unveiling of the company's new revolutionary tractor line, audaciously build the new generation of power. The 4 models range in size from the 1010, rated at 36 horsepower at the PTO, to the 410, rated at 84 horsepower. The 3 larger models featured a synchronized transmission, which gave the farmer 8 forward speeds, 3 reverse speeds, on the go shifting within a range of 4 speeds, and shuttle shifting between forward and reverse. Additionally, their innovative closed center hydraulic systems providing up to 3 hydraulic circuits to serve a rear end rock shaft and 1 or 2 remote cylinders gave him instant power for a variety of uses. The models also came with power steering and a larger 2 with power brakes. In short, the new generation of power put Deere a decade ahead of the competition. Stanley Lancaster, the former Harvester executive, Whistler recalled in 1982, in one fell swoop, Deere had it all. This is all happening. This is a slow decline. There's a bunch of things that happen with the labor unions during this time as well. It's rough. It's rough for Harvester right now, and they're not going to recover from it. We know that, given that it becomes Case IH later, but Deere comes out swinging. They are in tune with what their farmers want. Okay. So not only are they in tune and now starting to outclass Harvester, guys, there's a big shift here happening. There's a big shift happening. Deere, clearly in tune with their customers, comes out with the most legendary models of tractor to date. You know, the 410, the 420s, all that entire line to this day is still in operation around the country. It's crazy stuff. It's 1950s. The 410 series, the 420 series soon is about to come out. A decade of technological advancement over where Harvester is at. If you guys don't know, the 4020 and the 410 are some of the most reliable models of tractor ever produced. When I was farming, we had 2 4020s that were worked nearly every day on the farm. They just go and go and go. If there's a tractor that will be sitting in my front yard as an ornament one day, it will be a 4020. They have a 410 out actually, no, it might be a 3020 out in front of the John Deere Tractor Museum here in Waterloo, Iowa. These are legends. These are legendary machines. And I would say this is the nail in the coffin that, secured Deere's for sure leadership. Harvester had nothing to come at it with. And that's a big deal because when you're the leader for that long and Deere comes and just slaps you in the face and says, this is the future of the industry, this is where we're going, because we've asked farmers what they want and this is it, it's a big deal. So I'm going to leave that today at part 1. The 410, the 410, the 4010, and the 4020 are on the scene. John Deere's in the lead, and Harvester's got to figure out what the crap they're going to do. The Harvester at this time is big, it's bloated. They got to make changes. So I'm going to leave that at part 1 this week. I will come back with part 2 in a few weeks. guys, if you haven't picked up this book or you've never heard of it before, it's called A Corporate Tragedy. The Agony of International Harvester is the full title. It's an old book. It's hard to find. You can get it on the Internet Archive for free and just borrow it. It's a 300-ish page book. It took me a week to read. If you really want to commit, you can read it in a week for sure. But it's a great book. There's a lot of stuff that's about to happen that I'm excited to share, but I'm going to leave you guys there. Once again, if you are an outlier in this industry, if you consider yourself out of the ordinary, or you want to push and excel, if you want to be the best of the best, you want to learn, I want this podcast to be as of much value for you as possible. So if you got value from this, please leave a review. Uh, please share it with someone else. As always, I will try to be here every single week. If you enjoyed it, at the very least, leave it a review, give it a share. I'll see you guys next week.